Well, you may have received your state voting guide, and on there is, for this area, is one person who is a candidate for the Orange County Board of Education, Liz Dorn Parker. And nice to see you and meet you. You are an incumbent. You've been on the board for quite a while.
Yes.
And before I forget, I do want to mention that on your website, you look up Elizabeth Dorn Parker. You could actually put Liz Dorn Parker to come up, but just before we go on, I want to make sure.
Yeah, both go to the same site.
Yeah, exactly. But I want to make sure of that. So, how long have you been on the Orange County?
That's a really good question.
Education?
I've been on 32 years. I began as a 22-year-old.
Wow.
It was a really interesting story. At the time, I ended up being the youngest member ever elected to a county-wide board, whether it was school, supervisor, or anything. And it was a community, actually the community down here in Saddleback Valley, called our family. I was born in California, raised in Newport, Costa Mesa area, been public school since 5 years old, all the way through graduation of high school. And the seat was open, and there was a gentleman who had been recalled, running for the seat unopposed. So they actually called to see if my mom would run. But my dad, who was a pediatrician, was starting to semi-retire, and they were starting to go around the world bringing medicine to third world countries. So I happened to be in her kitchen, as I say, the right place, the wrong place at the right time. And I met with the folks down in Saddleback, and when she told me the story, and I just felt you needed to have an opponent. And the long and short of it is, after I jumped in, 3 or 4 people did, and I did not expect to win. 22 years old, I was newly married, right out of college. But I think because my community knew my family so well and knew I'd been very involved, I guess I won. And so at that point, I had quite a task to understand my job and go from there. And I've seen so much change in the 32 years, not just in public education in California, but in the responsibilities of the County Office of Education.
It's almost like a three-pronged system here. And what I mean by that is you have the administrators, people such as yourself. You have the teachers and the people who are in the trenches, so to speak.
Yeah, they're very much in the trenches.
And you have the students along with their parents.
Right.
And quite often what happens is that they all maybe see things differently on a daily basis. And so at times the teachers may look out to the board saying, what are you doing for us? The parents might be looking at the teachers going, what's this Common Core stuff coming in? We don't want our kids involved with this. Or we do. There are some parents who are quite excited about it. It's a very complicated thing. It always has been, but it's becoming more so. And one of those main things is, of course, the Common Core. It can be quite confusing to a lot of people.
It's interesting because Common Core is actually a group of governors 8 years ago decided the standards across the country were too low. And so in the majority of them were conservative governors who said we need to have national standards. And then each state made a decision whether to adopt the standards because the state is in charge of the standards. So California is one of the 48 states that adopted standards, which are Common Core. And now it's up to each school district to then implement the curriculum to meet the standards. And it is very much a huge shift. It's a huge shift away from No Child Left Behind, which was very much designed to do Scantron testing. And what the governors found, and most of the national educators, is the outcome of Scantron testing was you had some very excellent students who could take ABC, multiple choice questions, but they couldn't really critically think. They couldn't really excel and exceed whether they were doing career tech or whether they were going to college, a 2 or 4 year college. So there was an outcry that we need to support the public schools actually educating a higher level student. But when you have these huge shifts, there's some big concerns, which is what a lot of families are feeling. And as a school board member, my responsibility is the fiscal side and making sure that the resources and tools are available to the teachers. And my concern is in California, we have not had long-term stable funding for most of my 30 plus years. So without that, how can we possibly support this shift and support teachers in their classrooms, support the training they need, support the curriculum that needs to be developed and implemented, And that's a big challenge for us. And most of the teachers are there, they're in the front lines, they're in the trenches, as you said. Everything good about education happens in front of a classroom with a teacher, and the resources that they're provided and the support that they receive. So Common Core has brought up a lot of issues for all of us, and those of us who've been around a long time have seen a lot of things come and go. And one of the reasons they go is they're not fully funded. So that's
Right.
my challenge in the next 4 years, is to make sure if this is an initiative that the community decides is important, if the outcome is higher standards, how do I make sure that the funding and the resources happen? It's interesting that you provided the information about a legged stool to education, but we at the County Office of Education are a 3-legged stool. But one part is the schools we run, which we have 8,000 to 10,000 students any given day that are in alternative education. These are homeless, they're foster youth, they're in the juvenile justice system, they've been kicked out of school, or they're really hardcore, as I call truants.
Right.
The other one is the county office provides resources for all 27 school districts. And the third part is we actually are sort of an arm of the state to make sure our school districts have the resources they need from the state, but also they're producing solid fiscal policies in their budget. We oversee that to make sure we don't oversee what they spend the money on, but make sure they can pay their bills. And now we have a whole new formula coming up of a new way to fund schools and how we track to make sure that funding's reaching students in a way that's impactful. So we are a 3-legged stool at the County Office of Education. You remove any piece and we fall over.
What about charter schools? I mean, on your website, you did support all the charter schools that came. I think there's like 13 or 14.
There's 14 charter schools in Orange County. There's one that's a countywide charter. And I've been a part of both countywide charters, which is you support students that are educated countywide. The first one was for homeschools, that we have a large homeschool population, so they need to provide resources so they can succeed and those families, as their teachers, can succeed. The one recently was for foster youth. So I've supported 100% of those coming through. The other role the county office provides is an appeal. So if a local board does not agree that the charter school coming to them is fiscally sound, curriculum sound, and they don't violate taking care of special ed kids, we act as an intermediary to make sure that this decision was based on the facts and not on feelings. So those, we've had some tough decisions, and some of those I voted against and supported the local decision. But I have to say, in my district, I have the largest number of charter schools that the county office actually supported the local community implementing them. There's 5 in Capo, and there's 1 in Saddleback Valley.
Okay. Technology in the classroom has drastically changed.
Huge.
And for the better, and we have in many of our schools, certainly the one that my wife is involved in, the bring your own device has gotten very huge.
Yes.
And getting those devices into the classroom, whether you bring your own, or a lot of times what we're seeing are the Chromebooks that are in the classrooms now. And how will the county, the board, support the purchasing of the technology?
That's a great question. That one stool I talked about, which is resources the county office provides school districts, one of the ways is we can do a better contract for all 27 school districts for purchasing powers, technology backup, resourcing, software updates. But this is a really large challenge for our schools. In the last 15 years, we went from spending a huge amount of money to get everything wired to now a huge amount of money to get it wireless with appropriate firewalls. So this is a equality issue that's interesting about bring your own device. In our community here in Saddleback Valley, that is not as much of an impediment for success, but you go in other communities and within the schools within Saddleback and Capo, there are children who can't afford to bring their own device. And that's our responsibility, is if technology is what's going to make them successful for the global economy, we as a school district, we as the county office need to provide those resources and help with buying and grant writing. And again, it goes back to long-term stable funding. If part of the funding formula is to make sure all these tests come on a technology type basis, whether it's an iPad or a Chromebook, we have to provide that. That's unfair to ask the teachers to supplement it. It's unfair to ask the families to supplement it. And that's really a huge challenge.
And as we know, many of the teachers supplement their classroom as it is.
Absolutely.
In some cases, in some of the certain schools and districts, they do have a good PTA, which will reimburse. But there's still the, they go out and they purchase the stuff and put it on their own credit card and then wait for the reimbursement to come in. And unlike, when I was young, you'd walk into a classroom and all the materials were there.
Right. This is so wrong. In the state of California, we receive funding in a size and amount that is 49th out of 50. And to me, that is the crux of this long-term stable funding. We in California have to make a decision that schools have to be the most important investment we make. That's our future. And some of the outcomes has been, you walk into a classroom, when my oldest started, I got a list of items they needed.
Yeah, we get that.
And everything from tissue paper to actual pencils.
Yes.
To copy reams.
We still get that.
And I was, and at the time I was on the board, and I began to explore what is going on, and that's when I realized we don't have long-term stable funding. We don't have consistency of which supplies can come like it was when I was in school, where you walked in and you had at your desk your crayons when you were little and your pencils and your paper, and the families weren't asked to buy in. So this is the inequality when you don't fully fund your public schools and you don't fully fund it in a consistent manner, is you then have to rely on personal pocketbooks, and we're all taxpayers. We pay a lot of money, and this is the inconsistency, and it's to me, it's not fair, and it's something that we need to stop now.
One last thing, we're just about running out of time. It does have to do with Common Core, but some of the concerns out there, both teachers and parents, are going at the expense of Common Core. We're seeing the arts being pushed on the wayside. Whether it's just simply, a 4th or 5th grade child doing artwork to learning music, or maybe, learning certain video editing or whatever it may be. And there's many kids that absolutely excel at that. That's what gets them excited.
Gets them to school.
That's got me excited years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the issues and concerns I have, is when you move in this whole new direction, you have to make sure the full curriculum moves with you. And right now, Common Core is English, math. And it is my job to make sure the full curriculum is supported at the county office. As an artist and as a musician, you hit right in my wheelhouse, so to speak. And I know some of the large technology companies who support the arts is because they know even if they have the most excellent engineers, they need to have the arts to make them full, well-rounded, productive managers.
Right.
And that's my job, is to make sure the Arts Alliance continues to be supported at the County Board of Education, is to make sure our resources at the county office is made available to all the school districts so they can continue to implement the full curriculum. In Saddleback Valley, when a huge amount of money was suddenly ripped away the last couple of years with the state borrowing our money without paying us, is we came into Saddleback Valley and provided resources and initiatives and materials and training so that they could keep their priority of the arts and the music. And quite frankly, that's what makes a well-rounded student.
Right.
As someone, I always joke, my youngest son, who's an incredible person now and graduated college, wanted to major in sports. And the only way he stayed in school and stayed on task is because of what he was able to accomplish with his deep love of sports. And part of it was art. He was a terrible artist, but they made sure he could draw the baseball field and he could make a ball. And that created his excitement. And we don't know what that trigger is to make that student successful. And that's our job, is to provide all of those so you can make a passion in every child.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Again, the site, her website is LizDornParker.com. By the way, if you Google her name, you have to put Liz Dorn Parker, otherwise you'll get the actress. I think there's an actress.
Is there a Liz Parker actress?
Liz Parker or something like that. So just make sure of that. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment.